Today, I'll be talking about one of the strongest public teams for Gen 9 Overused, and that is this Levitate spam bulky offense by K4NGR. I will link the team report in the description, and I would highly recommend you all read it. It is too fantastic of a team for it to not get the attention it deserves. With that said, although I cannot offer the same insight as the creator of the team itself, I can certainly talk about my own perspective and why it's become one of my favorite teams for Gen 9 Overused. Frequent players of Gen 9 Overused will have experienced how hazard-centric the meta is, because of what Pokemon like Goldango enable, because the relative strength of defoggers is somewhat weak in this tier, and because there are a lot of well-explored methods to deny rapid spin. Furthermore, unconventional means of removing hazards like Court Change Cinderace or Tidy Up Mousehold run into awkward matchups where they are not so consistent. This becomes a problem, especially for offensive teams, because their Pokemon need their items and they need time in order to break through the opponent. And if hazards are up, that means they will likely not have that time. The way this team goes about solving that problem is by using levitating Pokemon in the form of Latios and Hydreigon to avoid spikes entirely, which is a huge drain on HP. Singularly dealing with Stealth Rock is actually not that big of a problem. It also has an Iron Valiant with heavy-duty boots, not the conventional booster energy, which aims to achieve the same effect. I would like to highlight some elements of the team. Scarf Latios has been amazing. It's a very strong attacker and acts as the speed control for the team. And tricking Scarf can diffuse a lot of threats that the team would otherwise struggle with. But when the Scarf is unneeded, the trick can also be used to ease certain matchups, like if you trick Scarf into Aurora Veil Ninetales, you get so much free positioning, the matchup becomes incredibly easy. Moving on to Hydreigon. Hydreigon's Meteor, Flash Cannon, Dark Pulse combination can break pretty much any special threat that is sent its way. And with Terra Steel, levitating steel types are a archetype the metagame seems somewhat unprepared for, and so it can find entries and offensive pressure on a lot of Pokemon. Rotom is an underappreciated part of the meta, and like Terra Steel Dragon, it's walling a lot of stuff and is probably the best burn spreader I've played with thus far in Gen 9 Overused. And unless there's a Slowking Galar, it's able to find a lot of Willows. Iron Valiant is the unconventional boots, but it assumes a similar Live Forever style of offense like Latios and Hydreigon. All this together culminates in a team that feels very intuitive and matches up very well into strong hazard stack compositions. I would also like to discuss something else, which is language education in school. I was born in China and I immigrated to Canada at a very young age. This meant that in addition to attending Chinese school during the weekends, I would also learn core French in school. And why I think that this type of education, this once a week or very limited time schooling is not effective, is our brains need immersion to force us to make connections and appreciate patterns in order to be functional. And when that's not the case, it's easy to fall back to some translator or to simply swap to a language that you're more familiar with. Mostly, language education comprises teaching vocabulary, grammar, conjugation, etc. But I think, although those are good to know to fast track your learning in some regards, it's not going to be useful unless someone who's learning that language is spending the time to immerse themselves and learn these patterns for good. I think the direction that language education in schools has to move in is encouraging students to immerse themselves in the language in some way or another, whether that be watching movies purely in the language with no subtitles. Otherwise, the brain is always going to take the path of least resistance. This could also be playing video games in the language, reading comic books in the language, anything that's sort of easily excitable, but still forces you to engage in the language in some way. I feel that without this element, nothing you teach about the theory will stick for very long, and whatever you may learn in theoretical lessons, you will eventually pick up on if you are forced to keep using the language. If you are intent on actually learning a language, try to keep this in mind. If you are an educator, try not to give your students an out so that they don't actually have to use the language, because that will not promote learning. If you are a parent of non-national origin, I suppose, and you have a language that you would like your child to retain, I would say, if at all possible, speak that as much as possible at home, so there's some environment where they are forced to use it. And with that said, I will let the rest of this game play. I hope you have a good day.